The gravel crunched under my boots like the shattering of my heart 2 days ago when I caught Mark with his best friend in our bed, their tangled limbs a betrayal sharper than any knife. Sweat stung my eyes as I pushed up the steep incline of the Wyoming Trail, each labored breath a futile attempt to purge the rot of 4 years down the drain, my backpack digging into shoulders already bowed by the weight of what-ifs. But then, the thunder of hooves shattered the solitude, a chestnut mare bursting from the underbrush like a fever dream, her rider yanking the reins so hard she reared up on her hind legs, dust exploding in a halo around them. His Stetson tipping back to reveal eyes the color of storm clouds, locking onto mine with an intensity that pinned me there, mid-stride, as if he'd ridden straight out of the chaos in my soul. I stumbled back a step, heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted out, the mare's hooves pawing the air inches from my chest. "Whoa, girl, easy now," the cowboy drawled, his voice low and gravelly, laced with that slow western drawl that hit like aged whiskey. He swung down from the saddle with the grace of someone born to it, boots hitting the dirt solid as roots, and in that split second, with the sun slicing through the aspens like Judgment Day, I saw him clear as sin, tall and lean, faded denim-hugging thighs that strained against chaps worn soft from years in the saddle. A chambray shirt unbuttoned just enough to show the glint of a silver chain against tan skin etched with faint scars from barbed wire, or worse. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a nose broken once and set crooked, lips quirked in a half-smile that didn't reach those eyes, which were still drilling into me like he'd caught me stealing something precious. "You all right there, darlin'?" he asked, tipping his hat back further, revealing sweat-dampened dark hair curling at the temples. Darlin'. The word hung in the air, casual as a summer breeze, but it landed like a spark on dry tinder in my gut. I wasn't used to it. Not from strangers, not after Mark's polished New York sneers had stripped me bare. I opened my mouth to snap something defensive, to tell him to watch where he was riding his damn horse, but all that came out was a ragged exhale, my throat too tight from the climb, and the ghosts chasing me up this godforsaken mountain. "Yeah," I managed finally, wiping my forehead with the back of my hand, feeling the grit of trail dust mix with the salt of unshed tears. "Just trying to clear my head. Didn't expect traffic out here." My voice cracked on the last word, betraying me, and I cursed inwardly. Nathaniel Hale, 28, and unraveling like cheap yarn on a backwoods hike. I'd driven out from Denver on a whim, ditching my graphic design gig and the sublet apartment that still smelled like Mark's cologne, chasing some bullshit notion of rebirth in the Rockies. Wyoming had seemed far enough from the city lights to drown out the echo of his apology. "It just happened, Nate. You're too intense." The cowboy chuckled, a sound like distant thunder rolling over the ridge, and looped the reins over a low branch, the mare snorting as she settled. Up close, he smelled like leather and pine sap, with an undercurrent of something earthier. Horses, maybe, or the wild freedom of open range. "Name's Jake Harlan," he said, extending a hand calloused from reins and rope, his grip firm but not crushing when I shook it. "And this here's Rosie. She's got a mind of her own on these trails, spooks at squirrels, charges at shadows. You look like you just saw one." I pulled my hand back, flexing fingers that tingled from the contact, and forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to me. "Shadows, yeah. Something like that." The trail stretched behind me, empty save for the whisper of wind through the needles, but in my head, it was crowded with memories. Mark's laugh in that Brooklyn bar where we'd met, his hand on my knee under the table, promising forever over cheap IPAs. For years of sketches on napkins turning into album covers, late nights tangled in sheets, building a life from pixels and passion. And then, 2 nights ago, the door I'd forgotten to lock swinging open to that scene. Mark's gasp, the other guy's smirk, the way my world tilted off its axis. Jake's eyes narrowed, not prying but seeing, like he could read the fracture lines spiderwebbing across my face. He wasn't the type to push. I could tell that much from the easy way he leaned against a boulder, thumbs hooked in his belt loops, giving me space without making it obvious. "Head clear and hike, huh? Best medicine for what ails ya. 'Cept maybe a stiff drink or a good ride." He glanced at the mare, then back at me, that half-smile deepening into something warmer, almost inviting. "You far from the trailhead?" "Weather's tinnin', storm brewin' out west. My spread's just over the rise. Got coffee on, if you're not in a hurry to chase demons alone." I should have said no. Should have shouldered my pack and kept climbing, letting the burn in my legs drown out the one in my chest. But there was something in his voice, a quiet anchor in the storm I'd been navigating solo. And damn if it didn't pull at the frayed edges of me. Nathaniel, I said, the name feeling foreign after days of silence. And yeah, coffee sounds better than another hour of this. I jerked my thumb at the endless green tunnel ahead, and he nodded, like it was the most natural thing in the world. We walked side by side down a faint side path off the main trail, Rosie plodding behind like a reluctant chaperone. Jake didn't fill the air with small talk. Instead, he pointed out things I'd have missed in my haze. The way the aspens shivered like they were gossiping, a hawk wheeling lazy circles on thermals that promised rain. His stories trickled out unhurried. Growing up on the Harlan Ranch, 10 miles from the nearest stoplight, learning to rope calves before he could ride a bike. Ain't glamorous, he admitted, kicking a pine cone into the brush. But it's honest. No games, no hiding behind screens. Honest. The word lodged in my throat like a bone. Mark had called me honest to a fault, right before he shattered it all. I swallowed hard, focusing on the rhythm of our steps, the way Jake's boots synced with mine without trying. By the time the ranch came into view, a weathered log house nestled against a barn that looked like it had seen a century of blizzards, smoke curling lazy from the chimney. The knot in my chest had loosened just a fraction. He waved me inside, the door creaking open to a warmth that smelled of brewed grounds and aged wood. And as I shrugged off my pack by the door, I caught him watching me again, that storm cloud gaze softening at the edges. Black? He asked, already pouring from a percolator on the stove. Black as my mood, I quipped, sinking into a chair at the scarred oak table, and he barked a laugh that filled the room like sunlight breaking clouds. We talked, or rather, I spilled, over mugs that steamed between us. It poured out of me in fits and starts. The city grind, the freelance highs and soul-crushing lows, how Mark had been my anchor until he wasn't. Jake listened without interruption, his fingers tracing the grain of the table, only nodding when I hit the raw parts. The way I'd packed a bag and driven west without a plan, just a need to breathe air that didn't reek of lies. Sounds like you loved him fierce, he said finally, when my voice gave out. That kind of burn don't fade easy. But out here, it gets quieter. I looked up, meeting his eyes across the table, and for the first time in days, the ache felt shared, not solitary. The rain started then, pattering against the tin roof like hesitant applause, and he stood to light the lamps as dusk bled into night. Storm's settling in. You can crash in the guest room, better than pitching a tent in this. I nodded, too bone-tired to argue, and followed him down the hall to a room that smelled of cedar and fresh linen. As he lingered in the doorway, silhouetted against the hall light, I felt it. The pull, magnetic and unbidden, like gravity shifting underfoot. Thanks, Jake, I murmured, and he tipped an imaginary hat, his smile gone crooked with something unspoken. Sleep tight, Nathaniel. Demons hate a full night's rest. The door clicked shut, and I stripped down to boxers, collapsing onto the quilted bed as thunder rumbled outside. But sleep didn't come easy. Instead, my mind replayed the day in loops. The mare's rear, Jake's hand in mine, the way his laugh had cracked something open inside me. For the first time since the betrayal, the shadows felt a little less suffocating. Little did I know, they were just gathering strength. Morning cracked open like an eggshell, gray light filtering through the curtains to find me tangled in sheets that weren't mine, the scent of rain-soaked earth clinging to my skin. I lay there for a beat, disoriented, the events of yesterday filtering back in technicolor. The trail, the horse, Jake's voice cutting through the fog like a lifeline. My phone buzzed from the pack I'd dumped by the door. No signal, just a frozen notification from Mark. We need to talk. I silenced it with a swipe, the screen's glow mocking me in the dim room. Talk. What was left to say that wouldn't taste like ash? Downstairs, the kitchen hummed with low activity, bacon sizzling, coffee brewing anew. Jake was at the stove, sleeves rolled to elbows revealing forearms corded from years of hard labor, a dish towel slung over one shoulder. He glanced up as I shuffled in, hair still sleep-rumpled, and slid a mug my way without a word. Mornin'. Slept like the dead. Like the walking wounded, I admitted, wrapping my hands around the warmth, the ceramic grounding me. The rain had tapered to a drizzle, drumming a soft rhythm on the window panes, turning the world outside into a watercolor blur of greens and grays. We ate in companionable quiet. Eggs scrambled loose, toast thick and buttered, the kind of breakfast that filled more than your stomach. It was domestic in a way that twisted something sweet in my gut, a far cry from Mark's kale smoothies and intermittent fasting lectures. After, he saddled up Rosie for a patrol of the fences, the ranch sprawling 1,000 acres of rolling pasture dotted with black Angus that lowed lazy in the mist. "Come on," he said, jerking his chin at the spare horse in the corral, a bay gelding named Buck, gentle-eyed and broad-backed. Nothing clears the cobwebs like wind in your face. I'd ridden once, a dusty trail ride in the Catskills that ended with chafed thighs and a hangover. But this felt different, raw, elemental. Jake helped me up, his hands steady on my waist, calluses rasping against my shirt in a way that sent a shiver skittering down my spine. "Loosen your hips," he murmured close to my ear, breath warm against my neck. "Let him lead, you follow." I nodded, swallowing hard, and we set off at a walk that quickened to a trot, the ranch falling away behind us as the trail wound up toward the higher meadows. The air bit crisp, laced with the tang of wet sagebrush, and for the first time, the weight on my chest lightened enough to draw a full breath. Jake rode easy beside me, pointing out the lay of the land, the creek that flooded every spring, the elk rut in fall that turned the ridges into a symphony of bugles. His stories wove through the hoofbeats, losing his dad to a freak ranch accident when he was 18, shouldering the spread alone with a brother who'd bolted for Cheyenne and never looked back. "Family's what you make it," he said, reining in at an overlook where the valley unfolded like a rumpled quilt, mist clinging to the folds. "Blood don't always stick." I dismounted stiffly, legs protesting the saddle's grip, and we sat on a fallen log, sharing a thermos of coffee laced with whiskey from his flask. The burn spread warm through me, loosening my tongue. Mark said the same, once, before he decided our family wasn't cutting it. The words tasted bitter, but saying them aloud to Jake felt like lancing a wound, the poison draining slow. He didn't offer platitudes, just passed the flask back, our fingers brushing in a spark that lingered. "You strike me as the type who builds things solid, Nathaniel," he said after a pause, his gaze fixed on the horizon where clouds parted to reveal a slash of blue. "Don't let one storm tear down the foundation." There it was again, that seeing, deep and unflinching, peeling back layers I'd armored over. I turned to him, close enough to count the laugh lines fanning from his eyes, the faint scar above his lip from some boyhood scrape. In the city, attraction had always sparked fast and fizzled, hookups in dimly lit bars, apps that promised connection but delivered ghosts. This was slower, like roots seeking soil, and it scared the hell out of me. We rode back as the sun clawed higher, drying the world in patches of gold. Lunch was sandwiches on the porch, watching Rosie graze, her tail flicking flies like a metronome. Talk turned lighter, my botched attempts at urban gardening, his secret stash of classic rock vinyls hidden in the barn from his Cowboy code days. By afternoon, the drizzle had cleared, and he suggested a hike to the hot springs tucked in a cleft of rock a mile off, nature's own spa, minus the overpriced robes. The path was narrower, overgrown with ferns that brushed my calves like whispers, the air growing steamy as we climbed. Jake led, his stride sure-footed, pausing to hack at a fallen branch with a pocket knife, muscles flexing under his shirt in a way that drew my eye despite myself. At the springs, steam rose in lazy curls from pools terraced like natural jacuzzis, rimmed with mossy stones that glowed faintly in the dappled light. "Strip down and soak," he said, matter of fact, already toeing off his boots. "Doc says it's good for the soul." I hesitated, the vulnerability hitting like a cold slap. Me, shirtless and scarred from a lifetime of hiding, him all easy confidence. But his back was to me as he waded in, broad and marked with a tattoo I hadn't noticed. A compass rose between his shoulder blades, arrows pointing true north. Something in that image, the permanence, the direction, propelled me forward. I shed my clothes, the air kissing skin prickled with goose flesh, and slipped into the water opposite him, the heat enveloping me like a lover's arms. We floated in silence at first, the steam veiling us like a confessional. Then, tentative, I asked about the ink. "Reminder," he said, tracing it absently with wet fingers. Dad's words before he went. "Find your north, son. Rest'll follow." His voice dipped low, carrying the weight of unspoken loss, and I found myself sharing fragments of my own. Mom's slow fade from cancer when I was 12, Dad's retreat into workaholic silence after. The water lapped between us, a barrier and a bridge, until our knees brushed underwater, accidental but electric. That night, dinner was steaks grilled over mesquite in the yard, stars wheeling overhead like scattershot diamonds. Wine from a bottle he'd liberated from a Cheyenne trader loosened us further, laughter echoing off the barn as we swapped increasingly ridiculous stories. My disastrous prom date with a straight jock who'd used me as beard cover, his first awkward fumble with a ranch hand under the hayloft. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced across his face, and when he leaned in to stoke the flames, our shoulders touched, lingering. "Your trouble, Harlan," I said, half teasing, heart pounding a tattoo against my ribs. He met my eyes, the firelight gilding his irises to amber. "Only the good kind, Nate." The nickname slipped out soft, intimate, and before I could overthink it, his hand found mine across the Adirondack chair arms, thumb stroking the back in slow circles. The world narrowed to that point of contact, the betrayal's echo fading under the roar of possibility. When he kissed me, gentle at first, then deepening with a hunger that matched my own, it tasted like redemption, like the first real breath after drowning. We tumbled inside, a tangle of limbs and whispered wants, the guest room door banging shut behind us. His body was all hard plains and yielding warmth, hands mapping me like uncharted land, drawing gasps and pleas I'd forgotten I could make. In the afterglow, sweat slick and spent, he pulled me close, breath ragged against my temple. "Stay a while," he murmured, and I did, tracing the compass on his back as sleep claimed us, dreaming not of shadows, but of horizons. But dawn brings clarity, and with it, the first cracks in our fragile idyll. 2 weeks blurred into a rhythm I hadn't known I craved. Dawn rides across dew-kissed pastures, my hands steadier on the reins each day. Lazy afternoons mending fences, Jake's laughter booming when I botched a knot and ended up lassoed to a post. Evenings lost in each other, the ranch house our private universe where city scars dissolved in the heat of his touch. Nathaniel Hale, the Brooklyn boy who'd sketched dreams on napkins, was morphing into something wilder. Calloused palms from hauling hay, a tan line from shirt sleeves rolled high, a heart-mending stitch by tentative stitch under Jake's steady gaze. Mark's texts had trickled to silence, deleted unread, as Wyoming's vastness swallowed the urge to look back. It was the third Saturday when the world intruded, a dust-clouded pickup rumbling up the drive, horn blaring like an accusation. I was in the barn, currying Buck's coat to a gloss, when Jake's voice cut sharp from the porch. "The hell you doing here, Cal?" I froze, brush mid-stroke, the horse's flank twitching under my palm. Cal, his brother, the ghost from those late-night confessions, the one who'd fled the ranch like it burned. Stepping out, I saw them squared off. Jake, arms crossed over his chest like a barricade, jaw set granite hard. Cal, a leaner echo of him, city-slick in jeans too new and a button-down rumpled from the road, duffel slung over one shoulder. "Heard about the spread going under," Cal shot back, voice edged with that same drawl but twisted bitter. "Figured you'd finally fucked it up bad enough to need Belan out." The words landed like punches, and Jake's flinch was visceral, a crack in the armor I'd only glimpsed in passion's vulnerability. I hung back in the shadows, pulse thundering, as Cal's gaze swept the yard, Rosie in her paddock, the garden I'd weeded that morning, and landed on me, emerging with a nod that felt too casual. "Who's the city boy?" he asked, smirking like he'd caught them at a card cheat. "Nathaniel," Jake said terse, stepping half in front of me, possessive without trying. "He's helping out. Nate, this is my brother, Caleb." Uninvited. Cal's laugh was a bark, devoid of mirth. "Helping out. Right. Look, I ain't here to play family reunion. Thanks, Callan. Foreclosure papers came yesterday. Dad's life work, Jake? Gone if you don't sell." He tossed an envelope at Jake's feet, manila stained with coffee rings, and my stomach plummeted. "Sell? The ranch. The compass north Jake lived by." Teetering on the edge I'd been too blissed out to notice. Dinner that night was a minefield, Cal commandeering the kitchen like he owned it, slapping burgers on the grill with commentary that grated. The ranch too isolated, Jake too stubborn, their old man too dream-choked to diversify. I picked at my plate, Jake's knee pressed solid against mine under the table, a silent anchor. "We manage," Jake growled, fork scraping ceramic. "Always have." Cal's eyes flicked to me, speculative. "With pretty boy here? What's your angle, Nate? Escape the rat race, or just slum in it till the novelty wears off?" The jab stung, dredging Mark's ghost. Too intense, Nate. But Jake's hand clamped on my thigh, squeezing warning and warmth. "Back off," he warned, low thunder. Nate's more man than you've been since you lit out 5 years back. The air crackled, and Cal shoved back from the table, chair screeching. Fine. Bleed the place dry on pride. But when the auctioneer's here, don't say I didn't warn ya. He stormed to the guest room. Mine, once, slamming the door like a period on old wounds. Later, in our bed, Jake's body was tense against mine, muscles knotted like barbed wire. He ain't stayin', he muttered into the dark, my fingers working knots from his shoulders. But doubt had seeded, and as I traced his tattoo, I wondered, was I part of the problem, a distraction from the ledger's bleeding red? The next days were a grind. Cal shadowing us like a bad debt. His help, laced with critiques that wore Jake thin. Fences mended under his nitpicking. Cattle drives turned into arguments over routes Dad had laid sacred. I threw myself into work, sketching logos for local outfitters on my laptop during lunch, funneling freelance cash into a rainy day jar. I slipped Jake without fanfare. It felt like shoring up walls against a flood, but Cal's presence eroded them, his sly digs at our closeness. Ranch hands don't cuddle, bro, stoking insecurities I'd buried. One evening, after Cal's latest barb about distracting influences, Jake snapped, hurling a wrench across the barn. It clanged against the wall, startling pigeons into flight, and he sank onto a hay bale, head in hands. He's right, you know, he rasped when I knelt before him, palms on his knees. Spread's dying. I can't. I won't lose it. Not like Dad. You won't, I said fierce, cupping his face, thumbs brushing stubble rough as truth. We'll fight, together. Our kiss was desperate, a reclaiming, bodies crashing like waves on rock. But as we lay afterward, his heartbeat steady under my ear, Cal's truck peeled out gravel, taillights fading into twilight. Relief warred with unease. He'd return, I knew, with numbers that didn't lie. The breaking point came midweek, a call from the bank confirming the worst. Auction in 30 days unless the back taxes cleared, a sum that dwarfed my savings. Jake rode out alone that afternoon, returning at dusk hollow-eyed, Stetson clutched like a shield. Sold the North 40, he said flat, dropping the check stub on the table. Enough to buy time. My chest caved. The North 40, his favorite ride, the meadow where we'd first made love under stars. Jake, don't. He waved it off, but his eyes glistened, pride fracturing. That night, intimacy turned tender, almost mournful, his touches lingering like farewells. I woke to him gone before dawn, coffee cold on the counter, a note, right in fence line. Be back by noon. Noon stretched to 3, then 5, worry gnawing as thunderheads piled east. I paced the porch, phone futile in dead zones, until Rosie's empty saddle in the corral hit like ice water. Mounting buck bareback, I tore up the north trail, our trail, calling his name into the wind. The storm broke as I crested the rise, rain sheeting sideways, turning earth to slurry. There, in the meadow's heart, I found them. Jake dismounted, soaked to the skin, arguing fierce with Cal, who must have circled back unannounced. You're selling to developers? Jake roared, voice cracking over the downpour. Turning Dad's legacy into condos? Cal shouted back, faces inches apart. It's survival, you idiot. Or you want to drag your boyfriend down with you when we're homeless? The word boyfriend twisted innocuous, but the venom in it, dragged down, flayed me open. I spurred Buck forward, mud flying, dismounting in a skid. Enough! My yell cut the gale, both turning, drenched and wild-eyed. Cal's smirk faltered. Jake's face crumpled with guilt. This isn't about land or money. It's about us. All of us. But as I stepped between them, Cal's envelope fluttered from his pocket, spilling photos. Jake, younger, arms slung around a faceless guy in faded Polaroids, backs to the camera on this very meadow. Found these in the attic, Cal sneered. Thought your honest life's hiding more than debts. Jake went white, snatching them, rain blurring the images. That was nothing. College fling. Over before it started. But the lie hung, and suddenly pieces clicked. His hesitation that first night, the way he'd flinch at closeness in daylight, the compass tattoo's north arrow pointing not just direction, but away from truths buried deep. Betrayal bloomed cold in my veins. Not Mark's echo, but fresh. Jake's secret's a mirror to my own shattered trust. You said no games, I whispered, stepping back as thunder boomed judgment. Cal watched smug, the wedge he'd driven home. I didn't. Nate, wait. Jake lunged, but I was already swinging onto Buck, wheeling away as the sky wept. The ride back was a blur, rain masking tears, heart hammering betrayal's rhythm. By the time I hit the barn, shivering and spent, resolve hardened. Pack, leave, before this wild hope turned poison. But as I stuffed clothes into my duffel, the door banged open. Jake, dripping, eyes raw. Don't, he begged, voice breaking. It was fear, not deceit. After him. After losing Dad, the ranch, I built walls. You climbed him anyway. He crossed the room in 2 strides, hands framing my face, forehead to mine. I love you, Nathaniel. Fierce as this land. Let me prove it. The words hung, a lifeline or a noose. Outside, the storm raged on, mirroring the one inside. The air between us crackled thicker than the lightning forking the sky, Jake's breath mingling with mine, ragged and real, his hands trembling against my cheeks, not from cold, but from the terror of unraveling. Love. He'd said it plain, no frills, like branding a calf, and it seared straight to the bone, warring with the hurt Cal's bombshell had detonated. Those Polaroids, ghosts from a past Jake had glossed over, weren't just pictures. They were proof of patterns, of hiding that echoed Mark's polished evasions too damn close. Yet here was Jake, stripped bare in the lamplight, scars and all, begging not with words, but with the vulnerability I'd fallen for on that rain-lashed trail. I want to believe you. I choked out, my voice a stranger's, thick with the salt of unshed storms. But trust. It's a fragile damn thing, Jake. You rebuild it wrong once, and it crumbles. His thumbs brushed my jaw, gentle as sagebrush in wind, and for a heartbeat, I leaned into it. The pull of him magnetic as ever, the scent of wet leather and resolve, the way his eyes held mine without flinching. Then let me rebuild it right, he murmured, pulling back just enough to grab my hands, calluses rough against my smoother skin. No more walls. Full truth, his name was Riley. Summer after college, work in the rodeo circuit. Intense, like a wildfire, burned hot, then left ash. Scared the shit out of me, losing myself in it when the ranch needed me whole. So I buried it, like Dad buried his grief in whiskey. But you're no wildfire, Nate. You're the steady rain that greens the range. He swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing. I ain't perfect, but I'm yours if you'll have me. The dam cracked thin, not all at once but in fissures, tears hot on my lashes, a sob escaping that he caught with a kiss, soft and seeking, tasting of rain and redemption. We sank to the bed, not in passion's frenzy but in quiet anchoring, his arms a bulwark as I spilled the remnants. How Mark's betrayal had hollowed me, turning love to suspicion's lens. How Jake's honesty, flawed as it was, felt like sunlight piercing fog. Stay, he whispered into my hair, over and over, until the words wove into my bones. Cal slunk back at dawn, sheepish under bloodshot eyes, the fight leached out by a night in his truck. Over black coffee at the table, me and Jake shoulder to shoulder, united, he laid out the real math. Developers circling, yes, but a federal grant for conservation easements he'd unearthed, trading development rights for tax breaks and protection. Ain't selling out, Cal admitted, rubbing his neck. Just scaling smart. For Dad. For you. It wasn't absolution, but a bridge, brothers hashing numbers while I sketched proposals on scrap paper, turning ledgers into lifelines. The auction loomed, a shadow we charged at together. Days blurred into a war council. Jake testifying at county meetings in his Sunday best, voice steady as granite. Cal crunching figures late into nights, his city polish yielding to ranch grit. Me, bridging worlds with designs that pitched the Harlan spread as ecotourism gold. Trails for hikers like I'd been, cabins blending Old West charm with green tech. Skeptics grumbled, too isolated, too risky, but Jake's passion ignited them. Stories of heritage lands sustaining families for generations landing like seeds in fertile soil. The night before the hearing, we celebrated small. A bonfire in the North 40, the land still ours for now, stars pricking the ink-black sky. Cal brought beers from town, a peace offering, and for the first time, the three of us laughed easy, reminiscing Dad's tall tales, plotting expansions that honored roots without chaining them. Jake pulled me aside as embers glowed, his hand warm in mine. Couldn't do this without you, he said, kissing my temple. My north. The gavel fell 2 days later, grant approved, auction averted, the ranch not just saved but evolving. Protected acres drawing grants for sustainable grazing, my designs landing a contract with an outfitter chain. Cal stayed on, Not forever, but long enough to mend fences literal and not. His duffel unpacked in the bunkhouse. Betrayal's sting faded to a scar, a reminder that trust isn't blind faith, but chosen risk, watered by time and truth. Months rolled like thunderheads dispersing, fall painting the aspens gold, our first winter snow blanketing the world in hush. I split time between Denver gigs and the ranch, laptop commandeered by the hearth, Jake's head in my lap as I worked. Intimacy deepened, lazy Sundays in bed trading secrets over coffee, nights under quilts where his compass guided not just direction, but us, exploring edges with laughter and light. One crisp April dawn, as spring greened the valleys, Jake saddled Rosie and Buck, leading me blindfolded up the meadow trail. "Trust me," he teased, steadying me over roots, until the blindfold slipped free to reveal a picnic spread under the old oak, basket brimming with my favorite. BLTs on sourdough, thermos of spiked cider, a blanket strewn with wildflowers. He dropped to one knee, not with flash, but with a simple silver band etched with coordinates. Our meadow's latitude, the ranch's longitude. "Marry me, Nathaniel Hale. Let's build forever on this ground." Tears blurred the yes, but my nod was fierce, pulling him up into a kiss that sealed it. Raw, romantic, rooted. Cal hooped from the tree lean, beer raised in toast, the family weed forged cheering from afar. We wed that summer in the North 40. Under that oak, vows exchanged with wind as witness. Friends from my city life mingling with ranch hands in boots and bow ties. Mark a distant memory, uninvited and irrelevant. Jake's ring caught the sun as we danced slow to a playlist of our mishmash. Springsteen meets indie folk, his whisper in my ear. "Told you, darling. Only the good kind of trouble. Life ain't fairy tales. Storms still brew. Droughts test the herds. Freelance deadlines clash with calving season. Cal's wanderlust pulls him Cheyenne Warden now and then. But we weather them side by side, hands clasped over coffee, hearts mapped true. I hike less now, content in the valleys I've claimed. But when the city's clamor calls, Jake meets me on the trail, horse reined in, eyes locking like that first thunderous day. In the end, clearing my head led not to solitude, but to home, a man, a land, a love that changed everything. And damn if it ain't the most human story I could tell.